"Greetings, traveler. I'm glad to see you in my tavern. Here you may rest after a hard road, drink a mug of good ale, and listen to an old, honest witcher's tale, one that smells of smoke, winding roads, and silver coins." The road through Temeria was quiet that autumn, the kind of quiet that pressed into one's ears until even the creak of a saddle seemed too loud. Geralt rode slowly, Roach's hooves clopping over the hardened dirt. A pale mist rolled in from the nearby lake, curling between the reeds and drifting like a ghostly veil across the path. It was the kind of landscape that made travelers ride faster, eager to reach an inn's fire and forget what they'd seen in the fog. But the Witcher was in no hurry. He'd been following no contract, no royal summons, just the road. It had been a long season of hunting, and his purse was heavy enough. He'd thought to rest in Oxenfurt or even Novigrad, but fate, fickle as ever, had other plans. The signpost he passed that morning read simply, "Velhund, 1 mile." He had heard of Velhund once in passing, a lakeside village, small, unremarkable, but his memory itched. There was a tune he'd heard Dandelion play years ago, a slow, melancholy ballad about the bride beneath the lake, a story of love, betrayed, and vengeance unending. Geralt had never cared for such tales. Ballads rarely told truths about monsters. Still, as the mist thickened and the silhouette of the lake appeared, broad, still, and dark as oil, he felt the faint pull of that old song in the back of his mind. The village itself was little more than a cluster of timber cottages huddled against the lake's edge. Smoke drifted from crooked chimneys, and the smell of fish, mud, and damp wood hung in the air. Villagers stopped their work to stare at him. Farmers with rakes in hand, women rinsing linen at the shore, children watching wide-eyed from behind fences. Witchers were rare here and not always welcome. He guided Roach toward the tavern, a squat building with a peeling sign that read, "The Drunken Pike." Inside, warmth hit him like a wave. The hearth crackled, the air thick with smoke and cheap ale. The innkeeper, a barrel-shaped man with a nose red from drink, looked up from wiping a table. "Evening," the man grunted. "You're a witcher, ain't you?" Geralt nodded, removing his gloves. "I am." The innkeeper eyed him warily. "Ain't seen one of your kind here in gods, years. Sit then. Ale." Geralt accepted, seating himself near the fire. He said little as he drank, listening instead to the low murmur of conversation around him. Villagers spoke in half-whispers, about missing men, about the lake, about her. The words came like droplets through fog, dragged under, pale as snow, full moon coming. The innkeeper noticed his glance and sighed. "Aye, you've heard then. Another one gone last night. Thomas, the fisherman. Found him this morning, floating by the reeds. Looked like he'd drowned, but..." He trailed off, shuddering. No water in his lungs, just dead. Empty. Geralt set down his cup. "And you think something from the lake did it?" The man leaned in. "Don't know what else to think. Folks say it's the bride beneath the lake. The old song, you know, about Lady Mirena, the one who drowned herself after her groom betrayed her. My grandmother used to sing it. Said she still walks the lake on moonless nights, calling out for him." "Folk songs?" Geralt said flatly. The innkeeper shrugged. "Maybe, but the bodies keep turning up. The Reeves offered coin for anyone who will stop it. Not much, but enough." Geralt's interest stirred at that. He wasn't one for superstition, but corpses with no sign of drowning were no mere peasant fancy. Where can I find this reeve? House near the chapel, the innkeeper said. Name's Harlan. He'll be glad to see you, I reckon. Though between us, he should have called for help sooner. Been 3 dead in as many months. Geralt nodded, finishing his ale. He felt the weight of the villagers' stares as he rose. Witchers were half savior, half curse in such places, useful when trouble came, but unwelcome reminders of what lurked beyond candlelight. Outside, the mist had thickened, swallowing sound. The lake glimmered faintly under the gray sky, smooth as glass. As he approached the reeve's house, a woman crossed his path, carrying a bucket of water. She looked at him with wide eyes, then muttered a hurried prayer under her breath. The reeve, Harlan, opened the door before Geralt could knock. He was a stout man in his 40s, face weathered, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. Witcher, thank the gods. I sent a message to the nearest town weeks ago. Didn't expect anyone to come. I heard, Geralt said simply. Tell me about your dead. Harlan rubbed his temples. Thomas was the 3rd. Before him, 2 others, fishermen both. Always the same. Out by night, nets in the water, and come morning, found floating. Not a mark on them, not even bloated like they'd been killed quick. Healers say it's sorcery. I say it's a curse. Geralt's eyes flicked to the window where the lake's reflection shimmered faintly. What curse? The reeve hesitated. You'll laugh, everyone does. But it's her, the lady, the same one from the song. She drowned herself here, they say, and those who fish her waters on moonless nights never return. Geralt didn't laugh. I'll need to see the bodies, he said. Harlan blinked. Buried already. Dig them up. The reeve swallowed hard. You're serious? Geralt's tone was even. If I'm to deal with your problem, I need to know what I'm facing. A curse, a spirit, a drowned dead, it matters. They each die differently. Reluctantly, Harlan nodded. Very well. At dawn, then. Geralt turned to leave. The night was falling quickly, the mist thickening to a near-solid wall over the lake. Somewhere beyond the reeds, a sound echoed, soft like a woman's sigh. Roach snorted and stamped her hooves. Geralt paused, listening. Then he said quietly, Looks like your song might have had some truth after all. And with that, he vanished into the fog, heading toward the lake's dark edge, where old ballads were born and the dead were said to whisper beneath the water. Dawn broke pale and gray over Velhund, the mist still clinging to the lake like a second skin. The villagers awoke slowly, emerging from their homes wrapped in shawls and suspicion. By the chapel, the reeve and 2 men waited beside 3 rough wooden crosses. Geralt approached without a word, his cloak heavy with dew, his eyes shadowed beneath his hood. Thought you'd changed your mind, Harlan muttered, glancing nervously toward the graves. I don't change my mind, Geralt replied. Only my methods. The reeve gave a terse nod, and the men began to dig. The wet earth gave way reluctantly, each shovelful landing with a dull, sodden thud. Crows stirred from the chapel roof, cawing as if to protest the disturbance. When the last shovelful was cast aside, the Witcher crouched beside the first coffin. He lifted the lid. The stench of damp and decay filled the air, but Geralt didn't flinch. The corpse within was that of a middle-aged man, skin pale as milk, lips tinged blue. His eyes were open, glassy, and fixed toward the heavens. Geralt examined the chest, the limbs, the neck. No wounds, no bruising. He placed a gloved hand on the man's jaw, tilting it slightly. No sign of drowning, he murmured. No water in the lungs, no bloating. Blood's been drawn out. Drawn out? Harlan repeated, paling. Geralt nodded grimly. See the skin here? Tight, waxy, like something sucked the moisture clean away. He moved to the next coffin. The second body was nearly identical. The third, a younger man, had a faint mark on his throat. 2 small punctures, almost delicate. Leeches? One of the gravediggers ventured. Geralt shook his head. No leech leaves marks this precise, and no leech kills 3 men in as many months. He rose, brushing the soil from his hands. You said they all died near the lake? Aye, Harlan said. Out past the reeds, where the water's deep and still. They fish for eels there. Geralt looked toward the mist-shrouded expanse beyond the chapel. Then that's where I'll start. He returned to the tavern to fetch his gear. The innkeeper met his gaze with the same uneasy mixture of hope and fear. You've seen the bodies, then? I have. And something old, something bound to the lake. He took his potions, oils, and a bundle of herbs from his saddlebag. The silver sword gleamed faintly even in the dim morning light. As he checked the edge, a child appeared by the doorway. A little girl, no more than 8, clutching a wooden doll. She looked at him curiously. Mama says the lady takes bad men, she said softly. The ones who lie. Geralt paused, his gaze flicking toward her. Is that what your mama told you? The girl nodded solemnly. Says she was a bride once, but her husband broke his promise, so now she takes others till she finds him. The Witcher regarded her a moment longer, then gave a faint nod. Stay away from the lake, he said, and turned to leave. By mid-morning the mist had begun to lift, revealing the lake in its full breadth. It was vast, still as a mirror, its surface reflecting the gray clouds above. Waterfowl drifted silently between reeds. Somewhere far off, a heron cried. Geralt knelt at the water's edge, scanning the shoreline. Footprints, bare, small, and oddly deep, led from the mud straight into the water, but none came back. He uncorked a vial of oil and coated his blade with a thin sheen. Moon oil for specters and drowned wraiths. The scent of herbs and steel mingled with the damp air. Then he drew a small silver medallion from his chest, the wolf's head of Kaer Morhen, and held it steady. The medallion quivered faintly. Magic. Faint, but present. He rose, following the footprints into the shallows. The water was icy, biting at his boots. He took careful steps, his eyes scanning the ripples. A shadow flickered beneath the surface, swift as a fish. Then came the voice, soft, female, close. Do you remember me? Geralt froze. The voice was melodic, sorrowful, too human, too close. He turned slowly. A figure stood waist-deep in the water. At first glance, she was a woman of haunting beauty, skin pale as moonlight, hair drifting around her like strands of silver weed. Her eyes were dark pools, ancient and hollow. You are not of this world, Geralt said evenly, nor bound by life's laws. The woman smiled faintly. Nor by death's. You've come to take me from my home? I've come to stop the killings. Her smile faded and her tone grew colder. Then you'll fail, Witcher. They deserve it, all of them. The blood of liars, oath-breakers, thieves. Who are you? I was Marina, she said softly. Once promised to love and be loved, once betrayed. Geralt's grip tightened on his sword. You're a Rusalka? Is that what you call me now? She whispered, drifting closer. Your kind name's what it doesn't understand. You think me evil, but what am I if not what he made me? Who? Her gaze darkened. Harlan? The name struck like a hammer blow. The Reeve? Geralt asked. Her laughter was low and bitter. His blood, his father's father, the one who broke his vow and left me to the lake. Curses linger, Witcher. Blood remembers. The water stirred violently, rippling outward in wide circles. Geralt stepped back, silver flashing in hand, but she was gone, swallowed by the depths. He waited, every sense sharpened. Nothing but silence. Then slowly, he sheathed his sword and turned toward the shore. The Reeve's words echoed in his mind, always the same. Out by night, no mark on them. Geralt had seen enough to know it was true. The deaths weren't random, they were retribution. Ancient, deliberate, bound to a bloodline. When he returned to the village, Harlan awaited him outside his house, anxiety carved deep into his face. You found something, he said. I found your family's ghost, Geralt answered. The Reeve stiffened. Ghost? Lady Marina, the one from your song. She claims your forefather betrayed her and she's killing your men in vengeance. Harlan's face went ashen. That's madness, just a story. Geralt's tone was quiet but firm. Stories often start with truth. The Reeve swallowed, his hands trembling. Can you stop her? I can try, but curses like this don't end with steel alone. You'll have to tell me the truth about your family, about the lake, about what really happened to her. Harlan looked away, his eyes glistening in the fading light. Some things are better left buried, Witcher. Geralt's gaze was cold. The dead would disagree, and as night fell once more over Velhund, the wind carried a faint sound from the lake, a woman's weeping, echoing across the dark water, soft as the refrain of a forgotten ballad. Night crept over Velhund like a slow tide, drowning the world in silence. The fog had returned, thicker than before, clinging to every thatch roof and crooked fence post. The lake gleamed faintly in the distance, a black mirror under a sickle moon. Geralt stood by the tavern stable, tightening Roach's girth strap. He didn't intend to sleep. The Rushalka had shown herself, and such creatures rarely waited long before striking again. The Witcher's medallion vibrated faintly against his chest. Magic drifted on the air, subtle yet restless, as if the lake itself breathed unease. He had fought drowners, noonwraiths, alps, and bruxi, but Rusalki were different, born of sorrow, not hunger. They killed because grief demanded it. Breaking such a curse required more than sword or spell. Inside the tavern, the last embers in the hearth glowed dull red. The innkeeper had retired, though not before muttering another prayer under his breath. Geralt sat at a corner table, a map of the lake spread before him, candlelight trembling over its surface. Old ink traced the outlines of Velhund and a nearby ruin, the remains of House Doreen, long abandoned. That, he thought, must have been Marina's home. Footsteps disturbed his thoughts. The Reeve entered quietly, his face pale, eyes ringed with sleeplessness. You said she spoke to you, he began, voice low. What did she want? Vengeance, Geralt replied simply. Harlan swallowed hard. My grandfather told me of Lady Marina. Said she drowned herself after being jilted by Lord Doran's son, but that was 100 years ago. Blood runs deep, the Witcher said. If a betrayal was sealed in blood, a curse can last generations. She believes you share the guilt. The Reeve sank onto a bench, rubbing his temples. My family came from the old manor, but what's done is long past. Why haunt me now? Because the curse is tied to memory, Geralt said, and someone, or something, has stirred it awake. He folded the map. Tell me everything you know about the Doreen family, especially about her." Harlan hesitated, eyes darting toward the shuttered window. "They say she was beautiful beyond words, gentle, kind. Her betrothed, Lord Renfred, promised to wed her at midsummer, but when the day came, he never appeared. Rumor says he'd taken another bride, a noble woman from Vizima with a richer dowry. Marina vanished that night. They found her gown on the lake's shore and her veil floating among the reeds. A few days later, Renfred was found dead in his chambers, skin white as chalk, no wound upon him. Folks said her spirit took him. After that, the manor fell into ruin." Geralt listened in silence, then said, "You carry that bloodline still." Harlan nodded miserably. "I've never set foot near that manor. No one has. The villagers say the walls whisper and the lake glows on moonless nights." "That's where the curse began," Geralt said. "That's where it must end." He rose, fastening his sword belt. "Stay inside tonight. Lock your doors. If she comes, don't answer." "Witcher," Harlan began, but Geralt was already gone, stepping into the cold night. The fog closed around him like a living thing. His boots sank softly into the damp earth as he made his way toward the lake's northern edge, where the ruins of House Doraine stood. The air grew colder with every step. It took an hour to reach the manor. What remained was a crumbling skeleton of stone, its towers half sunken into the marsh. Ivy clung to the walls like veins. A single gate, rusted and broken, hung crooked on its hinges. Geralt passed through, medallion vibrating stronger now. He lit a torch. The light revealed cracked mosaics, the faint shimmer of once polished marble, and a grand staircase choked by roots. In the main hall stood a toppled statue, a woman in bridal garb, arms outstretched toward the lake beyond the shattered windows. Her face, though weathered by time, still held a strange grace. "Mirena," he murmured. A cold wind answered, whispering through the hollow halls. Then he heard it, soft footsteps on stone. He turned sharply, torch raised. A pale figure moved at the far end of the corridor, gliding soundlessly. Her eyes gleamed in the firelight, sorrowful yet unrelenting. "You should not be here," she said, her voice like ripples on dark water. "Perhaps," Geralt replied, "but neither should you." She smiled faintly, drifting closer. "You think to banish me? You do not understand. I am bound to this place, bound to his blood." Geralt's tone hardened. "The sins of the father should not damn the sons. They share his name, his face, his lies." Her eyes glowed faintly now, blue as the lake at dusk. "I waited beneath the water, waiting for him to come. But he never did, so I took the others. I'll keep taking them until his line ends." The Witcher drew a small silver vial from his belt. "There's another way. I can lift the curse, but you must speak your name and tell me how it was wrought." Mirena's gaze faltered, a flicker of old pain stirring behind the hatred. "He promised me love," she whispered. "Swore by the lake beneath the moon. When he broke his vow, I went to the water's edge and prayed for it to take me. It did. The spirits of the deep answered. They gave me this form and a hunger for truth." "Then it's truth that binds you," Geralt said, "not vengeance. The curse can be broken if one of his blood confesses, if the lie is undone." Her expression twisted, torn between longing and fury. "He will never confess. None of them will." "I'll make him," the Witcher said. The Rushalka's voice softened to a whisper. "If he speaks the truth, I'll be free, but if he refuses—" "I know," Geralt said. "You'll have to die." The torch flickered. For a moment she looked almost human, eyes glistening, lips trembling as if she might weep. Then she vanished once more into mist, leaving only the echo of her voice. "Tomorrow night, Witcher. Bring him to the lake." Geralt lowered the torch slowly. The hall was silent again, but he could feel her presence lingering like cold breath on his neck. He exhaled, long and low. "Always comes to that," he muttered. When he returned to Velhund, the eastern horizon had begun to pale. The villagers were already stirring, unaware of the bargain struck in the ruins. Harlan waited at his door, worry etched deep in his face. "Well?" he asked. Geralt's answer was grim. "She'll give you one chance. Confess your family's sin before the lake tomorrow night. Tell the truth, and she'll release you. Refuse, and she'll take you as she took the others." Harlan stared at him speechless. "You mean she spoke to you? Promised this?" "She did." The Reeve's face turned ashen. "And if I refuse?" Geralt's yellow eyes met his. "Then I'll do what Witchers do." Harlan's shoulders sagged. "You ask for the truth of a story older than my bones, Witcher. I don't even know if I have it." "Then find it," Geralt said, "before nightfall." The Witcher turned away, his voice low and final. "Some monsters are born. Others are made. Choose which you'll be, Harlan." And as the sun rose weakly over the lake, its surface rippled once as though something beneath had stirred, waiting. By evening the air had grown heavy, thick with the scent of rain and lake mist. Clouds gathered low and dark above Velhund, smothering what little sunlight remained. The village seemed to hold its breath. No laughter from the children, no hammer striking against wood, no voices raised in gossip. Doors were bolted, shutters barred. Only the Witcher moved through the empty streets, his cloak trailing behind him like the shadow of a storm. Geralt stopped by the chapel, where an old priest lit candles before the altar. The man looked up as the Witcher entered, his frail hands trembling slightly over the flame. "I know why you've come," the priest said. "The lady stirs again. I can feel her sorrow pressing against the walls of this place." Geralt gave a short nod. "You were here when the others died?" "I blessed their graves," the priest said softly, "and I prayed that she would rest. But prayers don't reach where she dwells." He sighed, his lined face weary. "Once, the Doraines were our protectors. When Marina died, it was said the lake turned black for 7 days. Since then, no marriage has been blessed here without fear." "She was betrayed," Geralt said. "Her curse feeds on that betrayal." The priest made the sign of the sun upon his chest. "Then truth is the only remedy. But truth cuts deeper than any blade." Geralt's eyes glimmered in the candlelight. "Then I'll make sure it cuts the right man." He left before the old man could answer. The rain began not long after, slow, deliberate drops that pattered against rooftops and pooled in the dirt. He found Harlan inside his home, sitting before a fire that had burned too low to give warmth. His wife and 2 sons were gone, sent to stay with kin in a neighboring village far from the lake. The Reeve's face was pale and drawn, his eyes red from sleeplessness. "I found something," he said hoarsely, motioning Geralt closer. Upon the table lay a cracked leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. "It belonged to my grandfather. I didn't know it existed until this morning." Geralt leafed through it slowly. The writing was neat at first, but grew erratic near the end. Names, debts, and accounts filled the early pages. Then came a passage written in a trembling hand. "She waits by the water each night. I told him to stay away, that she was not for him, but Renfred would not listen. He swore to marry her before the moon turned. Father forbade it, said the Doreen name would not be tied to a commoner's blood. So he wed another. I saw Marina at the lake the next night, in her gown, crying into the water. The next morning Renfred was dead, pale as frost. The curse took him first, but it will not end with him. Geralt's eyes lifted from the page. So your family silenced it, buried it. Harlan nodded. They feared losing their name, their holdings. When the manor fell, we built this village instead. They thought distance and time would dull her rage. Curses don't age, the Witcher said quietly. They wait. The Reeve's hand shook as he poured a cup of water. She said, I must confess. But confess what, Witcher? My ancestors' sins, my own? I never wronged her. Geralt leaned forward. The curse doesn't distinguish guilt, only blood. If you won't speak, she'll kill you. If you speak falsely, she'll kill you. Only truth will break it. For a long while, Harlan said nothing. The fire hissed softly, the wind pressing against the shutters, like a whispering hand. Finally, he looked up. Then I'll come tonight, to the lake. Gods help me, I'll tell her what I know. Good, Geralt said, rising. Bring no weapon, just your words. He left the house and returned to the tavern, where he prepared his gear in silence. From a pouch, he drew 2 small vials and set them upon the table, spectre oil and moon dust. He coated his silver sword with the first and pocketed the second. He hoped he wouldn't need either, but hope was a fragile thing in his trade. When darkness fell, the rain eased, leaving behind a hush so deep it felt unnatural. Geralt and Harlan met at the edge of the lake. The mist curled low across the water, silvered by the pale moonlight. Not a ripple disturbed its surface. She'll come soon, Geralt said, scanning the reeds. Stay behind me. Speak only when I tell you. Harlan nodded stiffly, his breath misting in the cold air. The Witcher drew his silver blade and planted it point down in the soil, muttering a few words in the elder tongue. A faint circle of blue light flared around them, a sign of protection, though its power was fleeting against curses born of love and betrayal. The lake stirred. From the water's heart rose a shape both terrible and beautiful. A woman's figure gliding above the surface as though the lake itself bore her up. Her gown shimmered with droplets, her hair floating like strands of moonlight. Witcher, she said softly, her voice echoing across the stillness. You kept your word. I did, Geralt said. He's here. Her gaze shifted to Harlan, who fell to his knees before her, trembling. Lady Marina, he stammered, I know not what my blood has done, but I beg you, spare me. I will do what you ask. Her expression was unreadable. Do you remember him then? Renfred Doraine, your forefather? He swore before this lake that his heart was mine, that he would never forsake me. I know of him, Harlan said, voice shaking. He wronged you, and you suffered. But I am not him. Marina's eyes flared with cold light. Then speak the truth of his betrayal. Name it, bring it into the open, and I will be free. Geralt watched closely. The air thickened with power. His medallion hummed like a struck bell. Harlan swallowed, his gaze fixed on the reflection of the woman in the water. He broke his vow. He chose another for gold. He left you to despair. And my family buried it, hid it behind silence. For that, I am sorry. For their lies, I confess. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then Marina's face softened, her eyes filling with tears that fell soundlessly into the water. At last, she whispered, the truth. The surface of the lake shimmered, rippling outward in a widening circle. The mist began to dissolve, the cold air lifting as if some invisible chain had broken. But the calm lasted only a moment. A sudden cry split the night, a sharp, keening wail of rage. From beneath the lake burst three figures, pale and writhing, their forms twisted by death, the drowned dead, echoes of the fishermen she had taken. Their mouths gaped in silent screams as they lunged for the shore. "Back!" Geralt shouted, drawing his sword. The silver flared bright, slicing through the mist as he met the first creature head-on. The blade bit deep, hissing as it cut through waterlogged flesh. The wraith collapsed in a splash of black water. The second came from the left. Geralt spun, parrying its claws, then drove the blade through its chest. The body burst into vapor, vanishing with a shriek. The third reached Harlan, dragging him toward the water. Geralt leapt forward, slashing across its neck. The thing fell back, dissolving into mist. The lake went still once more. Marina hovered above the surface, her form flickering like a dying flame. "I didn't call them," she whispered. "They were bound to me." "Then let them go," Geralt said, voice firm. "Let yourself go." Her gaze turned toward Harlan one last time. "The truth is spoken. My vengeance is done." Her body shimmered, fading into silver light. The lake grew calm, the mist lifting to reveal a pale dawn creeping over the horizon. The air smelled of rain and lilies. Harlan collapsed to his knees, trembling, tears streaking his face. "It's over," he whispered. Geralt sheathed his sword. "Aye, for her at least." He turned toward the water. The reflection of the sky rippled once, and for an instant he thought he saw her face there, smiling, serene, finally at peace. Then it was gone. Behind him the reeve murmured a prayer, but the Witcher said nothing. He simply looked upon the quiet lake, knowing that peace like this never lasted long. The wind rose gently, stirring the reeds, and somewhere, faintly, a new sound began. The soft, distant hum of a song carried over the water, no longer one of sorrow, but of rest. For 2 days, Velhund lived in quiet awe. The lake that had haunted them for generations now lay smooth and clear, reflecting the gray sky like polished glass. Fishermen returned to the water, casting their nets without fear. The tavern filled again with murmured laughter, the sound of mugs clinking, the low hum of songs once forbidden. The villagers spoke Geralt's name in gratitude, though only when he was not near enough to hear it. For most witchers were a necessary evil, steel-clad reminders that monsters still walked the land and that men could become monsters too. Geralt lingered in the village longer than he intended. He spent his mornings by the lake, his evenings sharpening his blades or mending Roach's tack. Something about the place held him, a quiet unease, the sense that not all was finished. On the third evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, the reeve came to him. Harlan's face had regained some color, though lines of exhaustion still etched his brow. "I owe you my life," he said simply. Geralt did not look up from his whetstone. "You owed it to the truth." The reeve hesitated, then nodded. "Still, I'll see you paid proper. The village took a collection. It's not much, but it's honest coin." Geralt paused in his work, meeting the man's eyes. "Keep it. The lake will need tending. Make sure no one digs near the manor. Let the dead rest." Harlan frowned. "You think she might return?" "No," Geralt said quietly. "But curses leave echoes, and echoes, if stirred, can whisper themselves back to life. The Reeve bowed his head, saying nothing more. That night rain came again, soft at first, then in sheets. Geralt lay awake, listening to it drumming on the roof of the stable where he slept. The scent of wet hay and horse sweat filled the air. He turned over, meaning to sleep, but a sound carried faintly from the lake, a note high and trembling, like the breath of a song. He rose at once. The rain fell harder as he stepped into the night. The village was silent, every window dark. He followed the sound down to the water's edge, where the reeds bent beneath the weight of the storm. His medallion was still, no sign of magic, yet the air felt wrong, thick with that subtle tension that only a witcher could sense. The hush before something breaks. A shape moved in the mist. He drew his steel sword, not the silver, and called out, "Who's there?" A figure stumbled toward him, cloaked and dripping with rain. It was a woman, her hair plastered to her face. She fell to her knees at his feet, gasping. "Help me," she whispered. They took him." Geralt knelt beside her. "Who?" "My husband, by the lake. He went to check the nets before the storm. I saw something pull him under." The Witcher's eyes narrowed. "You're certain?" She nodded, shivering. "I saw the water boil, like something alive was beneath it." Geralt helped her to her feet. "Go home. Lock your door. I'll find him." He strapped his sword across his back and stepped into the rain. The lake was a dark, shifting expanse, the surface breaking under the wind. He followed the shore until he reached the old manor ruins, the place where Marina's curse had begun, and he had thought ended. The torch in his hand hissed as rain beat against it, but he pressed on, the light flickering over the broken walls. The lake lapped softly against the stones, the sound almost rhythmic. Then he saw it, a single boot, half buried in mud, fresh. He crouched, studying the prints, 2 sets, one belonging to the man, the other lighter, almost barefoot, and they led straight into the water. Geralt's jaw tightened. Damn it. He tossed the torch aside, drew his silver blade, and stepped into the shallows. The water bit cold through his boots. He closed his eyes, reaching out with every sharpened sense. There. A ripple, not from the wind. Something large, circling below. "Come then," he muttered. "Let's finish this." The lake exploded. A shape erupted from the depths, all scales and sinew, its body long and serpentine, eyes burning with sickly light. It was no Rusalka, no spirit of sorrow, but a water hag, swollen and ancient, her claws glinting in the rain. Her skin hung in strips, pale as dead fish. Geralt barely had time to raise his sword before she lunged. The impact sent a shock through his arm. He rolled aside, slashing at her flank. The blade bit deep, black blood spilling into the water. She shrieked, the sound piercing as glass. "Witcher!" she hissed, voice like gravel. "You freed her. You broke the bond. The lake is mine now." Geralt ducked another blow, countering with a quick strike across her wrist. "You should have stayed hidden." She howled, and from the depths came 2 more shapes, smaller, twisted, perhaps her spawn. They rushed him, all claws and teeth. Geralt muttered the sign of Írden, and a circle of violet light flared around him. The creatures slowed, their movements sluggish within its bounds. He struck fast, cutting one down, then the other. The hag screamed and leapt at him, her jaws snapping inches from his face. Geralt drove his sword upward through her throat. The blade lodged deep. She thrashed, choking, then fell limp, sinking into the dark water. When silence returned, The Witcher stood, breathing hard, rain washing the black ichor from his armor. The lake stilled once more. He dragged the man's body from the shallows. The poor soul's neck was broken, his face pale beneath the storm light. Another life lost to the lake's long hunger. By dawn, the rain had stopped. Geralt stood at the chapel again, watching as villagers gathered, their faces gray with disbelief. "The lady's gone," Harlan said quietly, "but the monsters remain." Geralt looked toward the water. The hag was drawn here by the curse's end. When Marina's spirit left, she filled the void. Power like that doesn't vanish. It calls to what's hungry enough to answer. The Reeve bowed his head. "Will it happen again?" "Not if you leave this place be," the Witcher said. "No more songs, no more offerings. Let the lake forget." He turned to go. The villagers stepped aside, murmuring blessings he did not need. Roach waited by the road, her coat glistening with dew. Geralt mounted, glancing once more toward the mist-shrouded lake. Somewhere beneath those still waters lay centuries of grief, betrayal, and blood. He urged Roach forward. The road stretched ahead, long and lonely, but the Witcher preferred it that way. Work was never scarce, nor were monsters born from human sin. As the village faded behind him, he thought he heard a voice carried faintly on the wind, a woman's voice, soft and distant, humming the same ballad Dandelion had once played. He listened until it faded completely. Then he spurred Roach into a trot and didn't look back, for in the world Geralt of Rivia walked, peace was a rare thing and never free. By midday the rain had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and eerily quiet. Geralt rode east, away from Velhund and its lake, along a narrow road bordered by dripping willows and moss-grown stones. The smell of wet earth clung to the air. Behind him the village shrank into mist until even the faint smoke of its chimneys vanished. For hours the only sound was Roach's slow, steady gait and the occasional caw of a crow. The Witcher's thoughts drifted, unbidden, to Marina, the Rushalka, who had been more victim than monster. He had faced countless creatures born of malice, but she had been born of heartbreak, of a love twisted into vengeance. Those were the hardest to kill. Those left marks even silver couldn't wash away. The road wound through a stretch of marshland where reeds whispered like old voices. Geralt reined in Roach near a fallen milestone carved with the faded crest of Temeria. A narrow trail branched off toward a cluster of cottages barely visible through the fog. Smoke rose weakly from one, and the smell of cooking drifted faintly on the breeze. He was nearly out of provisions, and though he had coin enough, he preferred to barter with work. He guided Roach down the trail. The cottages were little more than huts. Mud walls, thatched roofs, small gardens overrun with weeds. A woman stood outside the largest hanging wet laundry on a line. She froze when she saw him, her eyes widening at the sight of the medallion at his throat. "Easy," Geralt said, stopping a few paces away. "Not looking for trouble, only a meal and a dry corner." The woman relaxed slightly, though suspicion still shadowed her face. "You're a Witcher," she said. "We've heard of your kind." "Usually means you've got a problem no one else wants to deal with," Geralt replied, her lips pressed together. "Ain't my place to say. But you might talk to old Brenna, the healer. She knows more of such things." Geralt dismounted, handed Roach's reins to a boy peering from behind a fence, and followed the woman's direction toward a crooked hut at the edge of the marsh. Smoke drifted from its chimney, thick and pungent with the scent of herbs. He knocked once, and a voice rasped from within. "Come in, Witcher. Been expecting you." He stepped inside. The interior was dim, lit by a single oil lamp. Jars of dried roots and feathers hung from the rafters, and a cauldron simmered over a small fire. The woman who sat beside it was ancient, her skin wrinkled like tree bark, her eyes sharp and knowing. "You knew I was coming?" Geralt asked. She smiled faintly. "Didn't need magic to guess. There's been a stirring in the waters. You've left a mark behind you, White Wolf. The lake spirits don't rest easy." "I dealt with what haunted Velhund," he said. "The curse is broken." "Maybe. But breaking a curse is like splitting a log. You never know where the splinters will fly." She motioned to a stool. "Sit. You'll want to hear this." Geralt sat, folding his arms. "Go on." Brenna leaned closer, her eyes gleaming in the firelight. "The lakes and rivers speak to each other, you know. When a spirit rises or falls, the others feel it. Since Marina's curse lifted, something's been moving east. Something old, drawn to the emptiness she left behind. The marshes whisper of it. Men vanish and the frogs go silent when night falls." Geralt's expression didn't change, but his medallion gave a faint tremor. "What sort of creature?" "Can't say. Some call it a drowned god, others a guardian cast out. But if you're wise, Witcher, you'll steer clear of the mire of Eluin." Geralt glanced toward the door. "And if I'm not wise, then you'll find what you're looking for," Brenna said softly, "and maybe what you're not." He rose, leaving a coin on the table. "Thanks for the warning." "Wasn't one," she murmured as he stepped outside. "It was a prophecy." The sky had begun to clear, streaks of pale blue cutting through the clouds. Geralt led Roach back to the road. The marsh stretched wide and endless ahead, broken only by distant clumps of trees. He'd heard of Eluin, a sunken mire where old wars had been fought, and legends said an elven temple lay buried beneath the mud. Such places attracted more than stories. By dusk, he found himself at the edge of it. The land sank gradually into waterlogged earth. Fireflies drifted over the pools, their light faint and ghostly. He dismounted, tethering Roach to a gnarled willow, and drew a small knife from his belt. Dipping it into the nearest puddle, he watched how the surface reacted. The ripples spread too fast, unnatural. He crouched, his eyes narrowing. A scent lingered there, faint but distinct. Decay, old blood, and something else beneath it, sweet and cloying. He whispered, "Necrophage." From the shadows beyond the reeds came a low hiss, then another. Yellow eyes blinked in the dark. Geralt drew his silver sword, the blade catching what little moonlight there was. 3 shapes emerged, drowners, their gray skins slick, their jaws gnashing, but these were larger than most, their spines lined with bone ridges like fins. "New breed," he muttered. "Lovely." They lunged. The Witcher moved with inhuman speed, sidestepping the first, cleaving through its neck. The second struck from behind. He pivoted, driving his elbow into its jaw, then thrust upward beneath its ribs. It collapsed in a wet heap. The third hesitated, gurgling, before retreating into the marsh. Geralt watched the water settle, his breathing steady. Then he knelt to examine the corpses. The flesh was different, harder, scaled in places. He cut away a piece and dropped it into a vial. "Mutated," he said under his breath. "Something's been feeding them magic." He cleaned his blade, then looked toward the heart of the marsh. A faint glow pulsed there, greenish and low, like the breath of a hidden fire. The mire of Aluin was awake. By the time he returned to Roach, the wind had shifted, carrying a new sound, distant, rhythmic, like the beating of a great heart beneath the mud. He mounted without a word and urged his mare onward. Whatever slept beneath those waters, it was stirring, and the white wolf knew better than to let such things wake fully. He glanced once over his shoulder toward the west, where Velhund's lake lay far behind. "Seems the song isn't finished after all," he murmured. Roach snorted, and the Witcher rode on into the mist, where reeds whispered secrets no man was meant to hear. The marshland deepened as Geralt pressed farther into Aluin. By morning, mist lay thick as wool, rolling low over black pools and half-sunken willows. The air reeked of stagnant water and decay, yet beneath it all he sensed something older, a pulse, faint but steady like a heartbeat under the soil. Roach snorted uneasily, ears twitching. The Witcher patted her neck. "Easy, girl. We'll not go much farther." The road, if it could be called that, had dwindled to a narrow track of slick clay and drowned roots. Every step squelched. Strange shapes loomed through the fog, twisted trunks, mounds that might have been graves, the remnants of forgotten villages swallowed by mud. Crows wheeled overhead, their cries hollow and distant. He rode until he reached a dry rise where the remains of a stone causeway jutted from the mire. There he dismounted, tied Roach to a leaning post, and surveyed the land. Far to the east, faint through the mist, something glimmered, a line of carved pillars. Rising from the swamp, they were elven make, smooth and graceful, though half buried and choked by vines. Geralt sighed. So the stories were true. He made his way toward the ruins. As he walked, the fog thickened until it seemed to press against his skin. His medallion began to tremble, not the sharp jolt of nearby magic, but a slow, rhythmic thrum, like the echo of a song beneath the earth. The first of the pillars bore runes so eroded they looked like scratches. Beyond it, the marsh opened into a wide clearing where shallow water mirrored the gray sky. In the center stood a structure, half temple, half tomb. Its roof had collapsed long ago, but the walls still bore the intricate designs of elder craft. Winged figures, coiled serpents, symbols of protection long forgotten. He entered cautiously. Inside, the air was cooler, heavy with the smell of moss and stone. Water dripped steadily from cracks above. He knelt beside a carved basin near the entrance, brushing away grime. Beneath the slime, words emerged in the elder speech, old, formal, and grim. "Here sleeps Aluin, lady of the deep paths, betrayed by kin, bound by song." He read the words aloud, quietly. The sound echoed strangely, as if the stones themselves listened. A whisper brushed his ear, faint as breath. "Who wakes me?" He turned, sword half drawn. Nothing. Only the drip of water, the hush of the marsh. Yet the medallion shook violently now, humming against his chest. "Another spirit," he muttered. "Wonderful." Then came the voice again, clearer, echoing within the chamber. "You are not elf nor priest. Why stand before my altar?" "Passing through," Geralt said dryly. "But your worshippers seem to be missing, or dead." The air shimmered. From the water at the center of the temple rose a figure, tall, robed, face hidden beneath a veil of reeds. Light pulsed faintly from within her chest, illuminating the chamber in a green glow. "I am Aluin," the voice said, though the figure's lips did not move. "Once guardian of these waters. Long have I slept, bound by silence, but the songs have changed. The balance breaks. Geralt sheathed his blade slightly, not lowering it entirely. You mean the curse at Velhund? The Rusalka's death? She was part of the weave, the spirit replied. Each water has its voice, each song its verse. When one ends, another must begin. Yet her song was torn away. The silence left behind draws hunger. Geralt frowned. Hunger? The spirit raised an arm. The surface of the water rippled, revealing beneath it shapes that moved, great shadows twisting through the mud. The drowned dead stir without master. The beasts feed on what remains. Soon even the living will be called to fill the void. So you woke to stop it? To restore what was broken, Eluin said. But I cannot. My power wanes, my temple lies forgotten. The blood of men has fouled the sacred waters. Only the one who broke the chain may bind it anew. Geralt's eyes narrowed. You mean me? The spirit inclined her head. You carry the mark of the lake's sorrow. Her curse clings to your path. The balance will follow you until it is mended. He cursed under his breath. Figures. You must seal the rift, she continued. There is a relic buried beneath this temple, the heart of the deep. It binds the songs of all waters, but it has grown corrupted. Cleanse it, and the hunger will fade. Fail, and the mire will swallow the living. Geralt stepped closer. What kind of corruption? The spirit's form flickered. The same that feeds on grief and betrayal. The same that made Marina what she became. A cold realization settled over him. Alicia's curse spread beyond the lake. It infected the very water. Water remembers, Eluin whispered. It remembers every tear, every drop of blood. You cannot unmake what was done, Witcher, but you can keep it from spreading. The glow around her dimmed. Go to the chamber below. There you will find the heart. But beware. The dead guard it still. Then she was gone, her light fading into the mist. The temple fell silent once more. Geralt stood motionless for a long moment, then drew his silver sword fully. The runes along its edge glimmered faintly blue. Dead guard and a cursed relic, he muttered. Just another day. He found the stairway behind a cracked pillar, descending into darkness. The air grew colder with each step, heavy with the scent of damp stone. When he reached the bottom, he found a vast hall half flooded with stagnant water. At its center rose a pedestal, and upon it lay the relic, a crystal sphere pulsing with dim light, veins of darkness swirling within. Around it stood 6 armored figures, motionless, their armor encrusted with slime and barnacles. Elven warriors long dead. Geralt took one step forward. The nearest helm turned with a groan of metal. Eyes flared green within the sockets. Of course, he sighed. The first wight charged, sword raised. Geralt met it head-on, parrying the blow and slicing through its arm at the elbow. The others moved with eerie precision, silent but relentless. He danced between them, his blade flashing in arcs of silver light. Sparks flew where steel met steel. 2 fell quickly, their armor shattering under the Witcher's strikes. The third grabbed his shoulder, pulling him into the water. Cold engulfed him. He twisted free, driving his sword upward into its chest. The wight convulsed, then collapsed. When the last fell, the hall fell silent save for the sound of his breathing. The Witcher waded toward the pedestal. The heart pulsed faster now, its glow deepening to crimson. He reached for it cautiously. The instant his fingers brushed the surface, the light surged outward, flooding the chamber. A wave of power hit him, visions flashing across his mind, Faces drowning, lakes boiling, Marina's sorrow spreading like ink through the world's rivers. He gritted his teeth and drew on every scrap of will, forcing the energy back. "No more," he growled. "It ends here." The crystal cracked. Light burst from within, blinding white. When it faded, only dust remained, drifting down into the still water. The silence that followed was deep and final. His medallion ceased its trembling. The pulse beneath the marsh was gone. Geralt stood there for a moment, drenched and breathing hard. So much for a quiet ride east. He climbed back to the surface. The fog had begun to lift, and dawn's first light filtered through the clouds. The marsh lay still, its waters clear for the first time in years. Roach waited where he'd left her, calm now, as if sensing the danger had passed. Geralt mounted, casting one last glance toward the ruined temple. Somewhere in the distance, he thought he heard the faint echo of running water. A river freed from its burden, whispering thanks. He turned Roach's head toward the rising sun. "Let's find a road that doesn't stink of rot for once." The mare snorted, and together they rode from the mire of Eluin, leaving the marsh to its silence and its ghosts. By the second dawn, the mire was far behind him, yet the memory of it clung to Geralt like a damp cloak. The scent of rot, the whispers of the dead beneath the water, those lingered long after the fog had thinned. He had seen many curses broken, yet few left such a weight upon the air. The world itself seemed to shift in the wake of the lake's release, as though something vast and unseen had stirred in its sleep. He followed the trade road east toward the Blue Mountains. The land rose slowly, the marsh giving way to fir forests and stony hillsides. Here and there the road cut through small hamlets of woodcutters and hunters, places where the people eyed him warily, but kept their fear quiet. A witcher's arrival was seldom good news. By noon he reached a crossroads marked by a weathered signpost. To the south lay Ellender, to the north the Dwarven passes, but it was the eastward road, narrow and half forgotten, that drew his eye. Someone had carved a symbol into the wood of the post, a triangle intersected by 3 slashes. He knew it. It was an old sign used by witchers, a mark left by those who traveled ahead to warn or beckon others. He leaned closer, tracing the lines with his gloved fingers. The cuts were fresh, no more than a few days old. Another witcher then, perhaps Lambert, perhaps someone else. Few of his kind still walked the path these days. He mounted Roach and turned east. The road wound through a dense stand of pines. Crows flitted between branches, and the air grew chill despite the sun. By the time evening fell, he caught sight of smoke curling above the trees. A campfire. He approached quietly, leading Roach by the reins. In a small clearing beside a stream, a figure sat upon a log sharpening a blade. A witcher, unmistakably, his hair dark, his armor scuffed, a scar cutting across his left cheek. "Didn't think I'd run into you this far from Kaer Morhen," Geralt said. The other man looked up and grinned. "Geralt, I'd say the same." "Eskel." They clasped forearms briefly, the bond between them wordless but firm. Eskel gestured toward the fire. "You look like death warmed over. Sit, I've got stew." Geralt seated himself, the warmth of the flames easing the ache from his limbs. "What brings you here?" Eskel stirred the pot with a wooden spoon. "Heard rumors of drowners north of the river, but it's worse than that. Something's driving them inland. Villages half a league from the shore found water corpses in their wells." Geralt frowned. "Saw the same signs near Velhund. Thought I'd stopped it." "Stopped what?" He told Eskel of the Rusalka of the lake and the cursed heart beneath Aluin. The other Witcher listened without interruption, though his brow furrowed deeper with each word. When Geralt finished, Eskel sat back, rubbing his chin. So whatever corrupted that heart may not have been confined to one place. You shattered it, but fragments could have scattered. Magic like that doesn't simply vanish. Geralt stared into the fire. That was my thought too. Then we've got trouble. There's talk among the elves, something stirring under the rivers. They call it the womb of waters. Say it was sealed by their priests ages ago. Sounds like what you found might have woken it. Geralt's tone was grim. And if it wakes fully? Eskel shrugged. Then we'll have more than drowners to worry about. They ate in silence for a time. The stew was thin but hot. When the fire had burned low, Eskel spoke again. There's a sage in the ruins of Ardgein. Elf half mad, but he knows the old songs. Might tell us how deep this runs. Geralt nodded. Then we ride together. They broke camp before dawn. The path to Ardgein climbed steadily into the mountains where mist hung low among the rocks and the air tasted of iron and pine. Twice they passed burned wagons, the carcasses of oxen strewn beside them. Once they found a footprint in the mud, massive, webbed, and lined with small teeth along its edges. Not a drowner, Eskel muttered. No, Geralt agreed. Something new. By midday they reached the ruins. Ardgein had once been an elven observatory, its towers now toppled, its courtyards overgrown. The sage they sought lived among the shattered stones, surrounded by scrolls and bones. He was tall and thin, with eyes like opals and a voice dry as dust. I know what stirs beneath the rivers, the elf said when they told him of Aluin's temple. We bound it long ago, a creature not born of flesh, but of sorrow. The elves called it Vadyanar, the drowned heart. It feeds upon the grief of waters, upon curses left unresolved. Geralt exchanged a glance with Eskel, and now it's feeding again. The sage inclined his head. Your actions broke its prison, not by fault, Witcher, but by fate. Each curse unbound leaves a wound, and wounds call to what drinks pain. Can it be killed? Eskel asked. The elf's lips curled faintly. If by killed you mean silenced, yes. The creature is bound to an anchor, an ancient song of oath and betrayal. Sever the song, and it will drown once more. Geralt frowned. How? You'll need the voice of one who was betrayed and the blood of one who betrayed. Only then can the song be reversed. Eskel snorted. Convenient. You wouldn't happen to have either lying about? But Geralt's mind was already turning. The voice of one betrayed. Marina. Her essence had been freed, yet echoes of her might remain in the waters. And the blood of one who betrayed, that bloodline had not ended with Harlan. There would be others. He rose. Then that's what we find. The elf tilted his head, studying him. Be wary, Witcher. The drowned heart has waited centuries. It knows how to twist the will of men. It will whisper to you, promise to end the sorrow it feeds upon. Do not listen. I never do, Geralt said. Outside, the wind had risen, whistling through the broken towers like distant voices. Eskel adjusted the strap of his sword. You've a talent for stepping in the deepest muck, you know that? Geralt smirked faintly. Someone has to. They left Ardgein behind, descending the mountain path as night fell. Far below, the rivers gleamed under the moon, winding like silver serpents through the dark. Somewhere in their depths, something vast and patient stirred, waiting for the next song to begin. Geralt felt the old weariness settle over him, that sense of endless motion with no true end. But there was no choice in it. The path called, as it always had, and he followed. Eskel rode beside him in silence, and for a time only the creak of saddle leather and the murmur of flowing water filled the night. When they reached the valley floor, the Witchers made camp among the roots of an ancient oak. Geralt sat by the fire, sharpening his blade as sparks rose into the darkness. "Think we'll find it?" Eskel asked. Geralt's eyes glimmered in the firelight. "We'll find something. We always do." Above them, thunder rumbled faintly, far off, yet growing nearer. The rivers whispered, restless, as though eager for what was to come, and somewhere beyond the hills, beneath the endless turning of the stars, the drowned heart pulsed once, slow, deep, and terrible. The storm came at dawn, sweeping down from the mountains with the roar of an army. Wind bent the trees, rain lashed the earth in blinding sheets, and thunder rolled like the growl of something ancient and hungry. Geralt and Eskel pressed on through it, cloaks drawn tight, their horses slogging through mud that sucked at their hooves. By midday, the road had vanished beneath torrents of water. They rode along the high ridge above a valley that had turned to a lake overnight. What had been fields and cottages now lay drowned beneath a restless, churning flood. Geralt watched the gray waves and muttered, "The rivers are rising too fast. This isn't natural." Eskel nodded grimly. The drowned heart's work, it's feeding already. They made for the high ground where an old watchtower stood. Once a border post, it now leaned like a weary sentinel over the valley. Inside they found shelter from the rain, a single dry room, a hearth long cold. Geralt lit a small fire, the flames guttering against the damp air. They stripped off their soaked cloaks and sat in silence for a time, listening to the storm. Eskel finally spoke. "You still think Marina's voice could be the key?" Geralt nodded slowly. "If what the elf said is true, the curse that created her is part of this. Her sorrow's song is the pattern the drowned heart mimics. If we can reach what remains of her essence, we might use it to bind the creature again." Eskel leaned back against the stone wall. "And where would we find the ghost of a ghost?" "Water remembers," Geralt said. "The river that fed Velhund's lake runs through this valley. If the drowned heart has spread, it'll start there. We follow the current." Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the flooded valley below. Through the glare, Geralt glimpsed movement on the far shore, something vast and pale gliding beneath the surface, leaving a wake in the rain. He rose at once. "We're not alone." Eskel followed his gaze. "Too large for drowners. Much too large." They saddled their horses as the rain eased to a steady drizzle. The river roared beside them, swollen and wild. They followed its winding path east until they reached a stone bridge half submerged in the flood. There, scattered across the bank, lay the bodies of villagers, men and women dragged from their homes by the water. Eskel dismounted, kneeling beside one of the corpses. "Drowned?" Geralt shook his head. "Look closer." The bodies were slick with slime, their skin pale and smooth but not bloated. Their mouths were open in silent screams, their eyes gone completely black. Around their wrists and ankles, faint blue veins glowed beneath the skin. "Drained," Geralt murmured, "like the fishermen in Velhund." Eskel swore under his breath. "So it's spreading through the flood water." Geralt's medallion began to tremble. The vibration came in short bursts, pulsing, rhythmic. "It's close." A low hum filled the air, a sound deeper than thunder, like the echo of a great drum beneath the earth. The water before them bulged, and something vast rose from its depths, a mound of gray flesh covered in barnacles and weeds. As it lifted higher, the shape became clearer, a monstrous form of limbs and tendrils, its body half human, half water. In its chest, a red light throbbed like a beating heart. The drowned heart, Eskel breathed. The creature's voice rolled through the valley like a tide. You break what you do not understand, Witchers. The song was never yours to silence. Geralt raised his sword. It's not a song. It's a curse. The creature's laugh was the rush of waves. Curses feed on grief, and grief is endless. Then it struck. A wall of water surged toward them. Geralt grabbed Eskel's arm, pulling him behind a boulder as the wave crashed over the bank. Roach reared, screaming, but managed to keep her footing. The Witchers rose as the water receded, blades drawn, potions burning cold in their veins. Geralt sprinted toward the creature, leaping onto a half-submerged rock. He muttered the sign of Igni, sending a burst of flame across its surface. The fire hissed as it met the creature's wet hide, searing barnacles into ash. It bellowed, lashing out with a tendril that struck him full in the chest. He flew backward, hitting the mud hard. Eskel was there in an instant, slashing at the tendrils with his silver blade. The creature recoiled, shrieking. Its heart, Geralt shouted, rising to his knees. Strike the heart. Eskel dodged another blow, driving his sword into the creature's chest. But the blade stopped halfway, caught in the pulsing light. The monster's hand swept down, knocking Eskel aside. Geralt charged, his medallion vibrating wildly. He whispered an incantation in the Elder speech, the words taught by Eluin's spirit. The water around him glowed, faintly blue, rising in a ring. The creature froze, its limbs thrashing in sudden fury. Her song binds you, Geralt said, and mine ends you. He thrust his sword forward. The tip pierced the creature's chest, driving through the red light. The sound that followed was not a roar, but a groan, the sigh of a river dying. The light dimmed, the tendrils fell limp, and the vast form began to collapse into water. When the flood settled, only ripples remained. The rain ceased, and silence fell over the valley. Geralt staggered to his feet, chest heaving. Eskel approached, bruised but alive. Is it done? For now, Geralt said, but water remembers, it always does. They stood watching the river return to its course. The bodies along the bank began to stir, not in undeath, but in release. The blue veins faded from their skin, their faces peaceful at last. Eskel sheathed his sword. You think Eluin was right, that the balance can be restored? Geralt wiped his blade clean, staring at the calm water. Maybe, but balance never lasts long. They returned to the road as the first sunlight broke through the clouds. The valley glistened like glass, the storm's rage washed away. For a time they rode without speaking. At length Eskel said, What now? Geralt looked east, where the mountains met the sky. There'll be other rivers, other songs. The world doesn't stop singing because we silence one verse. Eskel chuckled. Philosopher now, are you? Just tired, Geralt said, and hungry. They found a small village that afternoon, untouched by flood or curse. The innkeeper stared wide-eyed at the Witcher's soaked armor, but offered them food and a place by the fire. As the night deepened, Geralt sat alone near the hearth, listening to the soft murmur of rain beyond the shutters. Somewhere in the distance, a bard played a tune, slow, haunting, familiar, the bride beneath the lake. He smiled faintly, the first in many days. Perhaps, he thought, Marina's song had finally changed its ending. But as he closed his eyes, the medallion against his chest gave one last tremor, soft, almost imperceptible, and from far beyond the hills, where rivers met the sea, thunder answered. Morning came, pale and brittle, sunlight threading weakly through a thin veil of mist. The village where Geralt and Eskel had taken shelter was already stirring. Women at wells, men hauling nets from the nearby stream, children chasing hens through the mud. Life went on, heedless of how close death had passed. Geralt sat outside the inn, sharpening his sword, the rhythmic rasp of whetstone against steel, mingling with the caw of crows. Eskel emerged with 2 bowls of steaming broth and set one beside him. "You look as though you fought a dozen drowners in your sleep," Eskel said. Geralt gave a humorless grunt. "Would have preferred that to what we did fight." They ate in silence for a time, watching the villagers move about their morning chores. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke. Eskel spoke first. "I sent a rider to Kaer Morhen. Told Vesemir what happened. If the drowned heart's gone for good, he'll want to know." Geralt nodded, though his gaze remained distant. Gone isn't the same as dead. These things have a way of lingering. Eskel smiled faintly. "You always were the pessimist." "Realist." Geralt stood, sheathing his blade. "There's still something stirring out there. I felt it last night. Like a shadow. Under the current." "You think it survived?" "I think part of it did. It wasn't just a beast, Eskel. It was a will, one that's learned to move through water and memory. Killing its body may not have killed its hunger." Eskel sighed and rubbed his temple. "Then what do we do? Chase rivers until we find where it's gone?" Geralt glanced eastward, where the valley's stream wound toward the horizon. "That's exactly what we do." By mid-morning they'd left the village behind, riding east along the river's edge. The land flattened into a sweep of meadows dotted with wildflowers, deceptive in their calm. The water glinted beneath the sun, yet its current was too fast, too full for a normal spring thaw. Something unseen still pulled at it, drawing life toward the sea. After several hours' ride, they reached a wide ford where a merchant caravan had once crossed. The remains of wagons jutted from the mud, axles splintered, wheels half sunk. Bones gleamed among the reeds. Geralt dismounted, crouching beside the nearest skeleton. The skull's jaw was locked in a silent scream, and around the ribs, faint traces of blue-black residue clung to the bones. Eskel knelt beside him. "Looks familiar." "Same as before, residual magic." Geralt dipped a finger into the sludge and sniffed. Salt water, this far inland. They both turned toward the east, where the smell of brine drifted faintly on the breeze. "The sea," Eskel murmured, "if the drowned heart's fragments followed the current." Geralt stood, wiping his hand clean. "Then it's headed for the coast." They rode until nightfall, camping beside the riverbank. The sky glowed amber before fading to deep indigo, stars flickering like frost. Geralt sat sharpening his other blade, silver, though he doubted it would help much against what they hunted. Eskel leaned back against his saddle. "Been a long while since I saw the sea. Last time, I killed a siren who'd taken to attacking fishermen near Skellige trade ships. Beautiful creature, before she screamed herself to ribbons." Geralt smirked faintly. "You've a gift for romance." Eskel chuckled. Maybe I should have become a bard. Not as profitable, though. The laughter faded as the night deepened. The river gurgled softly nearby, its sound oddly uneven, as though something beneath disturbed the flow. Geralt's medallion gave a faint tremor. He rose without a word, scanning the dark water. The moon cast a pale sheen across its surface, broken only by ripples spreading outward from the center of the stream. Eskel joined him, drawing his sword. Company? Geralt nodded. Too quiet for beasts, too deliberate. The ripples grew. Then, with a rush of foam, something surged upward, an arm, white as marble, slender and dripping. It fell across the water's edge, followed by the curve of a shoulder, a face framed in dark hair. A woman lay half in the river, half out, her skin pale as frost. Her eyes opened, blue, unfathomable, and fixed upon Geralt. Help me, she whispered, voice like water over stone. Geralt's stance didn't change. Another Rushalka? Eskel muttered. If it is, she's playing the part well. The woman reached toward him weakly. Please. It hurts. Geralt's medallion hummed. Stay back, he warned. She flinched, shrinking from his voice as though struck. You think me one of them, she said softly, but I'm not. I'm bound. It drags me wherever the river flows. It won't let me go. Geralt stepped closer, watching her every movement. Who binds you? The heart, she breathed. It's not gone, Witcher. It changed its shape, took the flood into itself. It whispers to the water now. Eskel cursed. I knew it. The damn thing's alive. Geralt crouched beside her. You can feel it? It lives inside the current, she said. Every drop that moves toward the sea carries a piece of it. Soon the coast will drown, and the rivers will remember nothing but sorrow. Geralt's eyes narrowed. What are you? Her gaze met his, ancient and sorrowful. What remains of Marina? When you freed me, part of my curse fled into the water. The heart found it, fed upon it. Now we are one and many, song and silence. You must stop it before it reaches the sea, or it will never die. The Witcher stood. How? She raised a trembling hand, pointing east. Where the rivers meet the waves, there lies the drowned cathedral. The elves built it to honor Eowyn before she fell. The heart seeks to claim it. There you can end it or be ended. Her body began to dissolve, the water reclaiming her piece by piece. Hurry, she whispered, before the tide remembers my name. Then she was gone, her reflection scattering with the ripples. Eskel exhaled slowly. You still think it's done? Geralt shook his head. No. This time we finish it. They rode through the night, the moon guiding their path. By dawn, the smell of salt grew stronger, mingled with the cries of distant gulls. The river widened, merging with others until it became a broad estuary glimmering beneath the rising sun. In the far distance, across the marsh flats, they saw it, a line of stone towers jutting from the sea, half buried by centuries of tide. The drowned cathedral. Mist swirled around its spires, ghostly and pale. Between the waves, something pulsed, a rhythm slow and steady, like a heart too large for its body. Eskel whistled low. Looks inviting. Geralt's hand rested on his sword. If that's where it ends, then that's where we go. They descended toward the shore. The ground trembled faintly beneath their horses' hooves, as though the earth itself beat in time with the tide. The closer they came, the louder the sound grew. Not a heartbeat, but a song, deep and mournful, echoing through the mist. The water rose to meet them, and in its depths shapes moved, half seen, luminous, countless as stars. Geralt drew his blade. Ready? Eskel grinned grimly. Always. Together they rode into the surf, the waves closing over their boots as the ancient cathedral loomed ahead, its windows glowing with the light of something vast and terrible within. The final song had begun. The sea was a cold, gray beast that morning, restless beneath a shroud of mist. The tide clawed at the ruins of the drowned cathedral, its waves breaking against the stone with the slow, steady rhythm of a dying heart. The air smelled of salt and rain, and the cries of distant gulls echoed like ghosts across the water. Geralt and Eskel reached the edge of the shore at first light. Before them, half submerged beneath the tide, the cathedral rose like a corpse's bones from the sea. Towers jutted from the surf at crooked angles, broken arches framed the horizon. The sea had claimed it long ago, yet the structure endured, defiant and unnatural. "It's bigger than I expected," Eskel muttered, squinting through the mist. Geralt said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the faint glow emanating from the central spire, a slow crimson pulse that beat in time with the waves. His medallion trembled so violently it was nearly humming. "That's it," he said quietly. "The heart's down there." Eskel spat into the surf. "Figures. Always has to end underwater." The Witchers dismounted, tethering their horses to the rocks above the tide line. They packed light, silver swords, potions, and the bare essentials for a battle that might well drown them both. The air itself felt heavy, thick with power and decay. As they waded into the shallows, the water bit cold through their boots. Every step stirred clouds of silt that curled like smoke. The singing started as soon as they passed the first broken pillar, a low, mournful chant rising from beneath the waves. "Do you hear that?" Eskel murmured. Geralt nodded. "Voices, the drowned dead." The song grew louder as they pressed on, the melody haunting, almost beautiful. It was the same tune Geralt had heard before, the Ballad of the Bride Beneath the Lake, but warped, slower, deeper, as if sung by the sea itself. At the base of the cathedral steps, the water reached their waists. The doors loomed ahead, vast slabs of black stone etched with runes half erased by time. Geralt raised a hand, tracing one of the carvings. "Elven," he said, "Eluan's sigils, wards of protection or warning." "Doesn't look like they worked," Eskel said, pointing toward the faint crimson glow seeping from the cracks between the doors. Geralt pushed, and the heavy stone groaned, opening just enough for them to slip inside. The interior was vast, a hall of pillars descending into dark water. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the ceiling, casting wavering beams across the flooded floor. Statues lined the walls, tall figures of elves in ceremonial robes, their faces serene, their hands clasped over empty hearts. At the far end of the hall, beneath a collapsed altar, the red light pulsed stronger. The water around it shimmered faintly, alive with motion. "That's it," Eskel said. "The heart." Geralt drank a potion, the taste of bitterness and iron flooding his mouth. His eyes brightened to cat-like gold, the world sharpening into strange clarity. "Watch the water," he said. "It'll defend itself." He took a cautious step forward. The water rippled. Then with a rush of sound, figures rose from the depths. Half-formed shapes of men and women, their bodies translucent, their faces twisted in grief. They moved with the slow grace of dreams, surrounding the Witchers in a widening circle. "The drowned dead," Geralt muttered. "Marina's victims, bound here. They don't look friendly." "They're not." Geralt raised his hand, tracing the sign of Írden in the air. A violet circle flared around them, its runes blazing. The spirits recoiled, their forms flickering, But the heart pulsed brighter, and the dead pressed closer, hissing through mouths that no longer drew breath. "Eskel, left side," Geralt shouted. The other Witcher waded forward, silver blade flashing. His strikes cut through the wraiths, scattering them like mist. But more took their place.
Geralt fought beside him, each swing of his sword leaving trails of light in the dark water. Still they came, dozens of them, all singing the same mournful refrain. "This isn't working," Eskel yelled. "It's feeding them," Geralt realized.
"The song keeps them alive." He sheathed his sword, reaching into his pouch for a vial of thick black liquid, specter oil mixed with moon dust. He hurled it toward the altar. The vial shattered, releasing a burst of shimmering powder. The light of the heart flickered, and for the briefest moment, the song faltered. "Now!" Geralt bellowed. They charged together, forcing their way through the remaining spirits. The water churned, dragging at their legs, but they reached the altar. The heart lay there, half buried in silt, a massive crystal veined with red light, pulsing as though it breathed. The sound of the sea filled the chamber, deafening, furious. Geralt placed a hand upon the relic. It burned cold, pain shooting up his arm. The moment he touched it, images flooded his mind. Cities drowned, rivers bleeding, faces screaming beneath the tide, and amid it all, Marina's voice, soft and sorrowful. "You cannot end me, Witcher. I am every tear shed into the water, every promise broken beneath the moon." Geralt gritted his teeth. "You're not her. You're what's left." The heart pulsed violently. Waves crashed against the walls. Eskel grabbed Geralt's shoulder. "Do something before this whole place comes down." Geralt drew his silver sword and plunged it into the crystal. The impact sent a shock wave through the hall. The light flared blinding white, and the song became a scream. Thousands of voices crying out as one. The water rose, swirling into a vortex that lifted them off their feet. "Geralt!" Eskel shouted. "I've got it!" The Witcher forced his will into the sign, shouting the words of the old spell Aluin had given him. The runes along his blade burned blue, cutting through the crimson light. The vortex collapsed, and the heart shattered with a sound like thunder. The shock wave threw them both against the pillars. The roof cracked, sending cascades of stone into the water. When the light faded, the hall was silent. The red glow was gone. The spirits had vanished. Only the sea remained, lapping gently at the ruined altar. Geralt rose slowly, his body aching, lungs burning with salt. Eskel groaned beside him. "Tell me it's over," Eskel said. Geralt looked toward the shattered remains of the heart. "It's over," he said softly. They made their way out as the cathedral began to collapse. By the time they reached the shore, the tide had receded, pulling the ruins back into the sea. Only the spires remained above the water, silent and gray. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of salt and freedom. The clouds broke, revealing a sliver of sunlight on the horizon. Eskel exhaled. "Never thought I'd live to see the sea calm again." Geralt stared at the waves, his expression unreadable. "Neither did it." He turned to his companion. "Come on. Let's find dry land before the next curse wakes." They rode until the cathedral was a shadow behind them, swallowed by mist. The sea lay quiet once more, but Geralt knew its silence was not peace, only rest. And in the rhythm of the waves, faint and distant, he thought he heard the echo of a woman's voice, no longer sorrowful but free. For several days the road followed the coast. The sea lay to their right, calm now, its gray surface gleaming beneath the pale spring sun. To the left, the land rolled in soft green hills, broken by the dark shapes of distant forests. The air smelled clean, salt and pine no longer tainted by the rot of drowned things. Geralt rode at an easy pace, the rhythm of Roach's hooves steady beneath him. Beside him, Eskel looked more relaxed than he had in weeks. They had slept dry for the first time in a month, eaten fresh bread, and spoken few words. Witchers were not a talkative breed. Silence served them better than stories. And yet, beneath that silence, Geralt felt the faint hum of unease. Each time the wind shifted, each time the sea hissed against the sand, he thought he heard something. A low echo, half memory, half sound. Not words, not song, just the whisper of water remembering. They stopped one evening at a cliffside village called Durnish. Fishermen lived here, their homes of driftwood and stones stacked along the bluff. Nets hung drying from poles, and the scent of smoked herring drifted through the air. The villagers watched the witchers arrive, but said nothing. Fear mixed with awe in their eyes. The inn was small, a single room with rough-hewn tables, its walls covered in faded paintings of ships. The innkeeper, a wiry man with a seamed face, recognized them for what they were at once. "Witchers," he muttered, wiping his hands on his apron. "We've no trouble here, if that's what you're after." "We're not," Geralt said. "Food, ale, and a roof for the night." That seemed to ease the man's tension. "Aye, you'll have them." They ate in silence at a corner table, the fire crackling low. A few villagers drifted in and out, muttering greetings but keeping their distance. Eskel finished his meal, leaned back, and gave a satisfied sigh. "Almost feels wrong," he said. "Quiet, full bellies, peace." Geralt sipped his ale. Peace never lasts. The innkeeper, overhearing, frowned. "It should," he said cautiously. "Since the storm passed, the sea's been kinder, fewer ships lost, even the gulls have come back." Geralt's eyes lifted. "Storm?" The man nodded. 4 nights ago, waves as tall as towers. Some say the old cathedral finally sank for good. Geralt's grip tightened around his mug. "Did you see it?" "Not I," the innkeeper said, but a fisherman swore he saw lights beneath the waves, blue and red like the sea was on fire. Next day, the tide washed up things I'd rather not describe. Bits of fish that weren't fish, if you take my meaning. Eskel exchanged a look with Geralt. "Remnants," he murmured. Geralt said nothing, but his medallion gave a faint, brief tremor. The sea was quiet now, but the silence felt too perfect, like a held breath. That night, the witchers slept in a loft above the stable. The sound of the surf rolled softly through the cracks in the wall, rhythmic and steady. Eskel was asleep almost at once. Geralt lay awake, staring at the rafters, listening to the sea. Sometime past midnight he heard it, a voice, faint, melodic, distant. It drifted through the night air like mist. "Do you remember me?" He rose silently, hand on the hilt of his sword, and stepped out into the cool darkness. The village slept, save for the whisper of the waves. The moon hung low, a silver coin above the horizon. He followed the sound down to the shore. The tide was out, leaving a wide stretch of wet sand glimmering under the moonlight. Out beyond the breakers, something glowed beneath the surface. A faint, shifting light, blue and white, pulsing like a heartbeat. He waded in up to his knees. The water was cold, sharp with salt. The glow drew nearer, and from it rose a shape, a woman's figure, pale and translucent, her hair trailing like seaweed in the current. Geralt froze. "Mirena." Her eyes met his, calm and clear. "Not all of me was freed," she said. "The sea keeps what it loves." He took a step closer. You should have peace. I had, she whispered, until the heart broke. When it shattered, it left its song in me, a fragment, a memory. Now I am neither curse nor spirit, only a voice carried by the tide. Geralt's hand dropped from his sword. Then why call me? Because it listens, she said. The sea listens, and it remembers what you did. The curse is gone, but the balance you restored. It has shifted. Other waters stir now, lakes, rivers, even wells. They sing to one another, passing the memory of what was done. You're saying it's spreading? Not the curse, she said softly. The echo of its ending. The death of a song leaves silence behind. The world fears silence. Geralt frowned. And what does it do? She looked toward the horizon. It fills it with whatever it can find. Even men's hearts. Her gaze met his again, full of sorrow. You broke one bond, Witcher, but others will rise. The waters will find new songs to sing. The tide surged around them and the glow began to fade. Wait, Geralt said, what am I supposed to do? Her smile was faint, sad. You do what you always do. You walk, you listen, you choose. Then she was gone. The water stilled, the light extinguished. Only the moon remained, reflected in the sea's quiet surface. Geralt stood there for a long while, the waves lapping at his boots. When he finally turned back toward the village, the first faint light of dawn touched the sky. He said nothing to Eskel when morning came. They ate, paid the innkeeper, and rode out. The road wound along the cliffs, the wind tugging at their cloaks. Eskel noticed Geralt's silence. You saw something, he said. Geralt didn't answer for a while. Then, Mirena. Eskel frowned. Thought she was gone. So did I. They rode on in silence. The sea below shimmered beneath the sunlight, endless and calm. Eskel finally said, You think she's right? That it's not over? Geralt's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. It's never over. Not really. Every monster we kill leaves something behind. A stain, a memory. The world keeps the scent of blood. Eskel gave a wry smile. You sound like Vesemir now. Vesemir was right about most things, Geralt said. Ahead, the road dipped toward a valley filled with the scent of pine and wild thyme. The sea fell away behind them, hidden by cliffs, though its sound lingered faintly in the wind. For the first time in days, Geralt felt something like calm, not peace. He doubted he would ever find that, but the stillness that came after a storm. As they rode, he glanced back once. The horizon shimmered faintly, and for a heartbeat, he thought he saw the outline of the drowned cathedral. Beneath the water, whole and shining, its spires like the fingers of a sleeping god. Then the light shifted and it was gone. Geralt turned back to the road. Come on, he said to Eskel. There's always another contract. Eskel grinned. There always is. The wind carried the faint scent of the sea after them, a whisper of salt and sorrow that faded slowly into the sound of hoofbeats and the endless turning of the road. The road turned inland, winding through valleys green with spring and hills flecked with new blossoms. For several days, Geralt and Eskel rode without incident, passing from one quiet village to another, where people spoke little and kept their eyes lowered. The air had that washed clean scent that follows storms, and the sky stretched wide and empty above them, as if the world itself had drawn a long breath after drowning. It should have felt peaceful, yet Geralt's instincts would not still. Each night when he lay beneath the stars, the wind in the grass reminded him of whispering voices. Each time his medallion brushed against his chest, it quivered. Not the sharp buzz of danger, but a faint, uneasy tremor, like something half forgotten trying to be remembered. On the third morning, as they descended into a narrow gorge thick with willows and alder, the silence broke. From far below came the distant clang of iron and the hoarse shouts of men. Smoke rose in thin gray columns from the riverbank. Geralt reined in Roach. "Smells like burned oil," he said, and panic. Eskel grimaced. "Bandits? Or worse?" They rode down the slope. The river that wound through the gorge was low and fast, choked by reeds. Near its bend stood a cluster of wagons, overturned and burning. Dead horses lay in the mud, their harnesses tangled. Beside them, a handful of soldiers fought desperately against a thing that should have been dead long before. The creature towered twice the height of a man, its body stitched together from corpses, limbs mismatched and blackened by rot. It swung the wheel of a wagon as though it weighed nothing, scattering men like straw. "Flesh golem," Geralt muttered, drawing his silver sword. Eskel spat. "Wonderful." They galloped forward. The golem turned at the sound of hooves, its face, or the patchwork of faces it wore, twisting into something that might have been a snarl. It waded into the river with a splash, hurling its weapon. The wheel struck a boulder and shattered. Geralt leapt from Roach's saddle, rolling to his feet. His sword flashed, cutting deep into the creature's thigh. It howled, a sound that made the air shiver, and swung a massive fist. He ducked beneath it, driving the blade upward through the ribs. Black fluid gushed across the stones. Eskel came from behind, striking for the neck. The blade bit halfway before catching on bone. Together the two witchers heaved, twisting their swords until the creature's body tore apart at the seams. It fell with a crash that shook the ground, limbs twitching, then lay still. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of burning wagons. The few surviving soldiers staggered back, staring wide-eyed at the witchers. Geralt wiped his blade clean and sheathed it. "Who made that thing?" he asked. Their captain, a grizzled man with one arm bound in blood-soaked cloth, shook his head. "We don't know. Came out of the river this morning. Killed a dozen before we could draw steel." "The river?" Eskel asked sharply. The man nodded. "Aye. Rose from the water like it was born of it." Geralt's expression hardened. He walked to the riverbank, kneeling beside the shallows. The water ran clear, yet beneath the surface he saw faint trails of dark sediment, twisting through the current like veins. His medallion quivered. Eskel joined him. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "It's the heart," Geralt said quietly. "Fragments of its power still flow through the waters. Anything that dies there can wake again, twisted." Eskel's jaw tightened. "We shattered the damn thing. How many more pieces could there be?" "Enough." Geralt stood. The rivers carried its remnants inland. Every stream, every pond touched by that tide will remember what it was. Maybe not today, maybe not for years, but the world doesn't forget magic like that. He turned to the captain. "Burn the bodies, all of them, and don't drink from this river again." The man swallowed hard. "What are we to drink then?" "Rain," Geralt said, mounting Roach. "It's safer." They left the gorge by dusk. The hills beyond glowed gold in the fading light, but the beauty of it felt hollow. They made camp among the birches. The air was cool and smelled faintly of ash from the burning wagons. Eskel sat polishing his sword. "You ever think it's hopeless?" he asked suddenly. Geralt looked up. "What?" this, Eskel said, gesturing broadly. Monsters, curses, whatever God's forsaken things crawl out of graves. We kill one, another rises. Maybe Vesemir's right, the world's just sick, and we're cutting at the symptoms. Geralt's eyes reflected the firelight. Maybe. But someone has to keep the fever from burning everything. Eskel chuckled softly. That's your problem, brother. Always the martyr. Geralt smiled faintly. And you're the optimist, I take it? Always? Eskel leaned back against a log, folding his arms behind his head. Still, I'll sleep better knowing there's at least two of us left to swing a sword at the dark. The night deepened around them. Crickets sang, and the wind whispered through the grass. For a time, Geralt allowed himself to believe the quiet was real. But in the small hours, when the fire had died to embers, he woke to the sound of rushing water. It wasn't the river. This was nearer, louder. He rose and stepped to the edge of the camp. The stream that wound past their camp glowed faintly blue. In its shallows, something moved. Shadows, twisting together, forming shapes that rose and fell with the current. Faces, hundreds of them, flickered beneath the surface, their mouths open in voiceless song. Geralt's hand went to his sword, but he did not draw. He stood watching until the light faded, leaving only the ordinary sound of water over stone. When he returned to the fire, Eskel stirred. What is it? Nothing, Geralt said, just the river talking. Eskel grunted, half asleep. What did it say? That it remembers, Geralt murmured. He sat staring into the dying fire until dawn, the scent of salt still faint in the wind. By midday they reached a crossroads. Eskel turned north toward the passes, where word of a wyvern contract had reached him. Geralt faced south toward Temeria's heartlands. They clasped forearms briefly, brother to brother. Don't drown, Eskel said. Don't burn, Geralt replied. They parted without another word. The road carried Geralt through fields, alive with spring, farmers tilling soil, children chasing crows from the seed beds. The sight should have been heartening. Instead, it filled him with that old, familiar ache, the sense that the peace of men was as fragile as glass, and that somewhere, unseen, the world's slow rot continued beneath it. As the sun sank low, he reached a small bridge spanning a brook. He paused, looking down at the water. It flowed clear, reflecting the crimson of the sunset. Yet for an instant, when the wind stirred the surface, he thought he saw a shimmer, blue and faint, like the last sigh of a dying flame. He leaned on the bridge's railing, listening. There was no song, no voice, only the murmuring of the stream. Still, he whispered to it, as one might to an old friend. Rest, if you can. Then he turned Roach toward the road ahead, the setting sun at his back. The path stretched on, endless and uncertain, as it always had, and behind him, far away, the rivers carried his reflection downstream. One more shadow among many, bound to the flow of a world that never truly forgot.